The moment Alara Voss ran through the crowded city street, she wasn't thinking about where she was going. She was thinking about getting somewhere her past could not follow. Her breath came in short, frightened bursts as she clutched a small canvas bag against her chest and glanced over her shoulder. Behind her, the familiar black car was moving slowly through traffic. She knew that car. She knew exactly who was inside it. Her ex-boyfriend, Dorian Vale, had spent months convincing her that leaving him was impossible. Tonight, she had finally found the courage to prove him wrong. Alara pushed through the glass doors of an old luxury hotel, nearly stumbling as she entered the cool, bright lobby. She looked around desperately for somewhere to hide. The hotel was enormous, filled with business travelers, families, and staff moving beneath tall windows that let the clear afternoon light spill across polished marble floors. She saw a private elevator at the far end of the lobby and hurried toward it without thinking. The doors opened. She stepped inside, pressed the highest floor, and finally allowed herself one trembling breath. What she did not know was that someone was already standing inside the elevator. Before we continue, if you believe everyone deserves kindness, courage, and second chances, please like this video, leave a comment, share this story with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to Kindness Corner 2.0. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories of courage and second chances. The man standing in the corner was dressed in a perfectly fitted charcoal suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his expression completely calm. His name was Cashin Rook. In certain circles, people spoke his name carefully. Business newspapers described him as a private billionaire investor with interests across several countries. Others knew a darker version of the story. Cashin had built an enormous international security empire after taking control of his family's company, and people who crossed him rarely tried it twice. His reputation had made him one of the most intimidating men in the world of private power. Yet inside that elevator, he looked less like a terrifying figure and more like a tired man who simply wanted a quiet afternoon. Alara barely noticed him. She stood facing the doors, trying desperately to control her breathing. Her hands were shaking so badly that she almost dropped her bag. Cashin noticed. He didn't ask unnecessary questions. He simply moved slightly to the side, giving her more space. Then the elevator stopped unexpectedly between floors. The lights flickered once before the emergency system switched on. Alara closed her eyes. She had spent weeks feeling trapped, and now even an elevator seemed determined to keep her from escaping. Cashin calmly pressed the emergency button and contacted the building staff. His voice remained steady, but Alara noticed something unusual. Everyone on the other end seemed to recognize him immediately. Within moments, the elevator began moving again. When the doors finally opened, Alara stepped out quickly, but then she froze. Across the lobby stood Dorian. Her face lost its color. Dorian was smiling as though he had known exactly where she would run. Alara immediately turned around, searching for another exit. There was none close enough. Dorian began walking toward her, and the fear she had tried so hard to bury returned all at once. She took one step backward and accidentally collided with Cashin. Cashin looked at her, then toward the approaching man. He didn't need an explanation. He simply understood that she was frightened. Dorian stopped several feet away and demanded that Alara come with him. He spoke with the confidence of someone who believed he still had control over her life. Alara quietly shook her head. She told him she was finished and that she wanted him to leave her alone. Dorian's expression hardened, but before he could move closer, Cashin stepped between them. The change in the atmosphere was immediate. Cashin didn't raise his voice. He didn't threaten anyone. He simply told Dorian that the woman had clearly asked him to leave her alone and that he should respect her decision. Dorian laughed and asked who Cashin thought he was. Cashin gave him his name. The smile disappeared from Dorian's face. For the first time, Alara noticed that several hotel employees had gone completely still. The manager approached quickly, speaking respectfully to Cashin. Dorian suddenly understood who stood in front of him. Cashin Rook wasn't just wealthy. He was the man whose influence could close doors that money alone couldn't open. He was the person powerful executives avoided challenging. Yet Cashin didn't use his reputation to frighten Dorian. He simply asked hotel security to remain nearby and advised Alara to contact someone she trusted. Then he turned to leave. Alara stared after him, confused. She had expected someone powerful to demand something in return. Instead, he had helped her and walked away. She followed him. She didn't know why. Perhaps because she was tired of being alone. Perhaps because for the first time in months, she had met someone who didn't treat her fear as an opportunity. Cashin stopped near a quiet seating area overlooking the hotel's garden. Alara thanked him. He told her that she didn't owe him anything and that helping someone who was frightened was simply the right thing to do. Those words broke something inside her. Alara finally explained what had happened. Dorian had once been kind, charming, and supportive. Over time, however, his behavior had changed. He began controlling who she met, where she went, and how she spent her time. Whenever she tried to leave, he promised that he would change. Eventually, she realized that promises meant nothing without actions. She had secretly saved enough money to leave and had packed only what she could carry. Inside her bag was an old photograph of her late grandmother, a notebook filled with personal memories, and a small collection of documents that represented the life she was trying to rebuild. Cashin listened without interrupting. Then he told her something she would never forget: leaving a painful situation did not make her weak. Choosing peace after being afraid for a long time was an act of courage. Alara began to cry. Not because she was frightened this time, but because someone had finally told her that she wasn't foolish for wanting a better life. Cashin arranged for hotel staff to help her reach a safe public location and encouraged her to contact trusted family members and appropriate authorities. He made sure she understood that her choices belonged to her. He didn't try to become her rescuer. He simply opened a door and allowed her to walk through it herself. For the next several weeks, Alara rebuilt her life one small step at a time. She found temporary work at a design studio, rented a modest apartment, and began sleeping peacefully again. She still had difficult days, but each morning she reminded herself that she had survived the hardest decision she had ever made. Then one afternoon, she received an unexpected invitation. Cashin was opening a community design center funded through one of his charitable foundations. He remembered that Alara had mentioned her passion for architecture and design. The invitation wasn't a job offer. It was simply an opportunity to attend and meet people who might help her career. Alara went. She expected to see a room full of wealthy executives. Instead, she found students, artists, teachers, small business owners, and young people who had been given scholarships. Cashin stood quietly near the back of the room, watching everyone else receive the attention. Alara realized something important. The man everyone called dangerous had chosen to use his influence to create opportunities for people who had very little power of their own. When the event ended, Cashin congratulated her on her new design portfolio. Alara smiled and told him that she was finally beginning to recognize herself again. Cashin replied that perhaps she had never lost herself. Perhaps she had simply spent too long listening to someone who made her forget who she was. Months passed. Alara became one of the designers working with the community center. Her confidence returned. She started mentoring other young women who were trying to rebuild their lives after difficult relationships. She never pretended that everything became perfect overnight. Healing was not a straight road. Some days were difficult. Some memories still hurt. But she was no longer running. She was walking forward. One afternoon, Alara stood outside the community center in bright daylight, watching children leave an art class while parents waited nearby. Cashin stood beside her, quietly observing the scene. She thanked him again. He told her that she had done the real work herself. Elara smiled and said that perhaps that was the greatest gift he had given her. He had never tried to control her future. Cashin looked toward the children and said that sometimes the most powerful thing a person could do was give another person the freedom to choose. Elara looked at him and realized that the man she had first seen as a mysterious stranger was not the hero of her story. She was. He had simply been there at the moment she needed someone to remind her. And that changed everything. Years later, Elara would still remember that afternoon in the hotel elevator. She had entered that elevator believing she was running from her past. She had no idea she was standing beside one of the most powerful and feared men in the world. But the greatest surprise wasn't who Cashin Rook was. It was who Elara discovered she could become. She stopped measuring her life by the people who had hurt her. She began measuring it by the dreams she was brave enough to pursue. She learned that kindness didn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it appeared as a stranger giving you space, listening without judgment, and reminding you that your life still belonged to you. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and subscribe to Kindness Corner 2.0. Every interaction helps these stories reach someone who may need a little hope today. And before we end, I have one special request. Comment, "I choose courage and a second chance," if you believe that one kind moment can change the direction of someone's life. Because sometimes, the person who saves you isn't the one who carries you away from your problems. Sometimes, they are simply the person who stands beside you long enough for you to realize that you have the strength to walk away on your own. And sometimes, the most powerful escape isn't running from the past. It's finally choosing your future.